When is it time to say stop on a car project? Let's take a look. So you guys remember Bill. You've seen a video way in the past, and he had, what was it, a 74?
It was a 74. Yeah.
Datsun 260Z, not a 280 or 240, it was a 260Z. What was it, 11,000 miles on it?
I think it had less than 10,000 original miles on it. Yeah, that was one of your first videos, Dave.
Yeah, that was back when we were using our phone like a microphone, and like, hey, and talking into it. And
hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. But you've actually had one of these before, haven't you?
I have. I had a 1995 Alfa Romeo 164Q. It's the quadrifolio model. It had less than 10,000 miles on it, I think. I don't know, my memory fails me on that, but it was a really low miles car. You can find it on Bring a Trailer. That's where I ended up selling it. I'd say it's probably model one up from this.
Right.
Really, really rare.
And he also, you guys have seen a video on a Lotus Esprit Turbo where we pulled the cylinder head off and do a lot of work. That was his car. Right. And he drove it here today. He's enjoying it.
Thanks for reminding me about that.
Yeah, that was a big bill, wasn't it?
That was a big bill.
Okay, this here was also a big bill. You guys just saw in my previous video, the customer put $10,000 into this 164L. And you made a funny comment when we first walked in about having a car you can't get parts for.
Right, right. Well, yeah, these cars, for whatever reason, it's really, really hard to get parts for them. They didn't import very many of them in the first place, and there's only a few very specialized individuals that sell parts for these. And a lot of times they're waiting on parts either from Italy or to have the parts manufactured themselves. I mean, they're great, fun cars. It has a Busso engine in it. Have you shown them the engine?
Yeah, they've seen the engine on previous videos, yeah.
But not being able to get parts, it just makes it a big headache, because I mean, this car's been in your shop a long time.
Yeah, it is finally done. They're going to come pick it up actually here next week. But different people have different levels of when it's time to stop. 10 grand into this car, and it's running and driving. The AC, the heat works, the seats are redone. Everything is fully functional on this car again. And the customer's happy with that. And as long as he's happy, I'm happy, I get paid, he gets the car fixed. But most of you would probably stop way before 10 grand on this car. But there's another car in the shop we're looking at right now. We're going to talk about that. We're about at the point where the customer's reached a level to say stop. And there's a good reason for it. Let's hop over to the other car. Here is the other end of the spectrum. This is a 1983 Nissan 280ZX. This is after when they started, where they call them Datsuns. Now this is a Nissan. Really, it's kind of the same car, but...
Yeah, I think they changed their name because they were being sued from all the cars that were rusting out.
Maybe.
Probably not.
This one's got some rust issues itself.
I do specialize in sarcastic comments.
Yeah?
I can continue.
No. Okay. Well, you can say a few, but this car was brought here. I believe the customers had it sitting for quite a while. Sometimes people don't realize just how long a car has been sitting. They say, oh, it's been there for a couple months. I'd like to get it back on the road. This car, we pulled the gas tank out, and the gas had actually turned into varnish. It was so bad that it locked up the fuel pump, which was fairly new on it. It smelled really bad in the shop. All the other mechanics are like, what is that smell? We finally got it cleaned out. Everything's done as far as the fuel system in the back. But my estimate on this car is it didn't sit for a month. It's been sitting for over a year, possibly 2 to 3 years. Gas doesn't go that bad in 2 or 3 months. We did pull the tank out. We pulled the sender out and the screen, and it was just coated in a varnishy, gunky stuff. And we got it all cleaned up, new fuel pump. And it does get fuel, and it does try to run. But the next step in the process is fuel injectors. If I spray starting fluid in it, it runs perfect, smooth. So the ignition system is not the problem. It can run very well. It's not getting any fuel, and the fuel injectors are some of them are clicking, some of them are not. They're probably varnished up pretty bad. We have just about reached the limit of where the customer wants to go. I believe he thought maybe we could get a few things fixed on this, be back on the road. But let's take a look around this car before we dive in.
So looks like we have a unique fixer-upper.
It is. Different people have different ideas of what's worth putting money into or what they want to get back on the road. Some people would look at this car and say, no, I'm never going to get that car back on the road again. But then some people would look at it and say, if I could just drive it again, I'd be happy. They don't really care about the paint job or anything like that.
So it's certainly doable if you wanted to restore this car or to bring it back. It has some sentimental value for him.
Yeah, I don't know the whole story on the car, but he just said it was a fun car to drive and he wanted to get back running again. But you pointed out some rust or something you saw, Bill?
Yeah, it does have a few problem areas. It's got the, this is pretty typical though for these cars where they end up getting the rust around the windscreen. This windscreen would have to be pulled out and then the rust repaired and then put back in. It's not that tough of a job for a body shop. The only thing I'd be worried about is whether or not you could get this glass anymore. That would really concern me if I was going to be attempting that. And then if I had the windshield out, I'd just go ahead and replace the dash as well. Pretty sure you can get that dash. There's all kinds of Z-Car websites out there that support these cars with spare parts and just a whole plethora of advice. So it is doable. So I know when I brought you my 260Z, Dave, it only needed a few mechanical items. It was a super low miles car that had been stored inside and didn't need any body work. So I figured it was certainly worth restoring and bringing back to mechanical sound condition because really that's all it needed.
Yeah.
Something like this is going to definitely be a big project for the owner, especially when it comes to body work.
I noticed when we go along the side over here, all of a sudden, like just this quarter panel's been repainted, or is that just the original paint still in good shape?
Yeah, you know, it's hard to tell. This car has 180-some thousand miles on it and a long history. I mean, it's an older car. I mean, that could still be original paint or it could have been repainted. Maybe it wasn't an accident, maybe it wasn't an accident. It's hard to tell because a lot of these older cars, they don't show up on Carfax.
Yeah.
But when you see perfect paint like this on a panel and the rest of it's changed color, I'd say that the part that's changed color is probably original and this is likely not original paint.
Maybe it could have been wrecked at some point in the past, or
Maybe.
maybe.
Maybe it was just a quick repaint. Maybe it had some fading and they just did one panel. I don't know.
So I was incorrect, Bill. It still is called a Datsun.
Datsun by Nissan.
By Nissan, yes.
Needs a couple more years on it before it became Nissan.
Yep.
But yeah, these cars, I mean, it's not unusual to see them with body rust.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the way of the late 70s, early 80s. A lot of cars from that era had that issue.
And as we go down this side over here, it looks like maybe there's an algae or a mold growing on the paint.
Yeah, that can be taken off by a good detailer. Not such a big deal. We'll call that patina, Dave.
Yeah,
That's patina.
patina.
It's really nice. It has its original wheels.
Yeah, a lot of them have been changed out by now. This original wheels on it. Well, let's take a look at the interior. Let Mrs. Wizard give you guys a tour.
Well, ladies and gents, from this view, it actually looks pretty good. You can see right there, it does say it has 183,000 miles on here. And I think we can see that in many places on this car, but here at the gauge cluster, it actually looks pretty nice. We saw on the other side of the glass what the dash looked like, and it's got a few cracks in it, but again, this is a bit of an aged car, so nothing too much to, not be shocked with. Got some more gauges over here. Not sure if they work, but they're there. Looks like it does have an aftermarket stereo, considering I do not believe a Pioneer was installed in this vehicle originally, but it does seem to match nicely. You notice that we do have some pieces and parts out, such as the glove box tray. So that is out, trying to access some of the wiring components. You can see our fuses are open over there. Oh, good. There's some touch-up paint. I think they might need some of that. But we do have lovely gray sheepskin seat covers. And again, we don't know what it's going to look like underneath because, we are not taking them off. Amazingly, the door card looks great. So it does look like the car was sealed. So that means that the T-tops are pretty sealed. It doesn't look like they have leaked. Although it does look like some of the headliner foam is peeling down. It looks like the headliner itself has been removed. So it looks like that could be an issue, but I don't think that was from water damage. So I'm guessing with the back seat that we had leather up here at one time before the sheep invaded the front seats. So, but that is looking in really good shape. Looks like they've got a windshield cover there, but otherwise it's looking in pretty okay condition. Looks like there could have been leather across the top from the bar above the back window there, but again, we don't have that luxury. We do not know what was there originally. So as we end, ladies and gents, up here at the steering wheel, again, we have a lovely Z in the center because, again, we don't have the Nissan or the Datsun logo in there because the car is confused at who is making it at this point. I think the car is in a custody battle between the two car makers at this point in it when it was made. So enough of this interior talk. Let's check out what's under the hood.
It's steam clean, that's about it.
So there's our inline 6, and it actually, like I mentioned, if I put starting fluid into the air intake, it runs like a brand new engine. It runs perfect. But we're getting issues with the fuel at the fuel injectors. Fuel gets to the injectors, everything's working as far as that. But as I use my stethoscope when it's running, I can listen to the injectors, and some of them are clicking loudly, some of them are not doing anything at all. And it barely wants to run on its own fuel supply. So we're at $800 to $1,000 already, and then now we're going to dive into the injectors, and the customer said, let's find out what's going on with that, and that may be where we stop. If we can get it running decent, I'm not going to do anything else to the vehicle, being that it's just not really, in his eyes, not worth it.
Well, it does have good solid frame rails.
Yeah.
I don't see any rust at all on the frame rails, which is good.
Mm-hmm. This is back of the day when it's fuel injection, but there's still a lot of mechanical things, like the airflow sensor is a physical vane that moves with airflow. It actually moves. It's not just a sensor. It does have fuel injection, and that makes it a lot better. When I opened the hood and saw that it was fuel injection, I was actually happy. I really don't like to mess with old carbureted stuff, but
See some nice shiny new spark plugs.
yeah, I don't know that we put those on there. I'm not sure. I think we may have. I'll have to ask Danielson. He's actually the one working on it. Like I mentioned, with starting fluid, it runs great. We're going to figure out and possibly clean the injectors, get it to run good, and we're probably going to stop there. So I do applaud the customer for trying to get their car back on the road, but just like I mentioned a minute ago, sometimes time gets away from us. We park a car for a month or two, and we'll get back to it at some point, and before you know it, a year goes by, 2 years goes by. If you think you're going to not drive a car for a while, you need to get the fluid, get the gas tank drained, or at least put Sta-Bil in the tank. That way, you'll preserve the fuel. Run the car a little bit and get the Sta-Bil in the injection system. That way, the fuel doesn't turn to basically varnish and ruin the whole thing. I've been through this scenario many, many times where someone parks a car, way more time than they realize has passed, and it costs thousands and thousands of dollars to get it back on the road. And we put quite a bit into here, 260Z, but it wasn't like things were trashed.
And I didn't need to do any body work. And body work can get really expensive real fast.
Yeah. This one, even if we get it running and driving, just like the customer mentioned on the phone with Crazy D, there is a limit. We're about at the limit. He understands the car is not pretty. It's not fully restored. It's not worth putting 10 grand into it, kind of like the 164 we just looked at. I think his range is about 1,500 to 2 grand, and then he's going to say, I'm done, no more. It's easy to think, maybe a few $100 I can get it back on the road, but you don't know until you get it to the shop and you find out it's not a few hundred, it could be a couple thousand. And then you're like, oh my God, this is not what I want to happen right now. This is not what I was planning on. And although they're not mad at us, it's just like, let's stop and I'll regroup and we'll think about this at a later date. So all the cars you have, what do you have now? You have the 1980 TR8?
I have the TR8, I have the Lotus, and I have that little black BMW.
All right, the 320 that you guys have seen a video on.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, that one's like a 78?
It's a 78.
78 320i.
Great little car.
Yeah, it's a cool little car. But those cars, like in the winter, you still drive them and get them out and get the fluids moving. And
Got to get them out, got to drive them around a little bit, even if you're not going very far, just to kind of keep everything circulating in the car so you don't have problems in the spring.
right. And do you use a battery tender at all?
I do. I have battery tender on all my cars.
Yep. Battery tender works great over the winter, but I've actually had customers come in where a battery tender's been on a car for 2 or 3 years. The battery can still die.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't work like that, I
I don't
don't
think
think.
I'd recommend letting a car sit for that long unless you're draining all the fluids out of it and
Right.
prepping it specifically for cold storage.
So we'll see if we can get this thing at least running good. The guy can at least drive it home. But this is a risk that you take with one of these cars like this is the customer doesn't want to put any more money into the car, but what about the brakes? What about the safety of the car? I can't do anything. My hands are tied because the customer says no more money, no more work, we're done.
Now remember, Dave, in my 260Z that I brought you, it needed a lot of mechanical work because it had sat in that guy's workshop for like nearly 20 years.
Yeah,
So you ended up having to do, if I recall, you ended up having to replace all the brakes, all the hydraulics, the shocks, on and on and on and on and on. And I think we were probably at least 10 or 15 grand into that car before I sold it.
yeah, it was a lot of money into that car, but you made some pretty good money on it too.
I did make some good money. It's not a complaint, that's for sure. But
Yeah.
it does take a lot to restore something that's been sitting for a long time.
It does. You have to be prepared for the shock, for to get the phone call and say, this is going to be 10 grand. And you may not be happy with it, but you can say, you know, I understand, let's go ahead and do it. Or, like in this situation, hit the brakes, stop, we're done. So have you ever actually gone and looked at a car bill where they advertise that it runs, drives a good car, and you get there and it's, whoa.
I have many, many times. Obviously, the condition of the car is in the eye of the beholder. And in this case, I had it was a set 1974 MGB,
Okay.
and it's the guy advertised it as mint condition, flawless. And when I went and pulled the carpets back inside the car, I could put my hand all the way through the floor.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was mint condition and flawless.
That's pretty bad. Actually, Hoovie from Hoovie's Garage has had similar incidents. He buys lots of cars. You guys know that. And I can remember a Chrysler K car. It was a LeBaron he bought. It was advertised rust-free.
Right.
And it was the same situation. He could put his hand through the floor.
So you'd think I would have learned my lesson. Well, then I went on to buy a Porsche 993 from California, sight unseen. And I don't ever recommend you buy a car sight unseen, and everybody says don't do it. Dave will say don't do it.
Yeah.
But he still
But
does it.
I did it, and the dealership, well, let's just say they left a few things out on that car, and I ended up having to sink, I think, close to $30,000 into body work and engine work.
Oh my goodness. 30 grand?
It was a lot of money.
Wow. I do remember on that car that you had an air conditioning leak and it had been to the dealership. It's supposed to be the trained techs that know these Porsches.
Oh, that was fantastic.
And they actually told you,
Just keep recharging.
keep recharging it. That's normal on these cars.
They really didn't give me the impression they wanted to take that apart.
Yeah. We
They
finally,
jumped right in there.
yeah, we pulled what's called the suitcase. We pulled the whole thing out and we found the evaporator core was leaking.
Yep.
That's not normal. That's not something you just keep recharging it. That's not the answer.
Yeah. You really need to be careful when you're going to look at a car, because even from a reputable dealership, it's really in the eye of the beholder. And a lot of times, people just want to get the thing sold. Car dealers want to get it out the door quick, and they get into a habit sometimes of telling you what they think you want to hear, so that just go ahead and pull the trigger on it.
Yeah.
Never
that's
buy
right.
a car sight unseen.
Never. Even though I do, because I can mitigate the risk and get through it, just like on the Juke. I can get myself out of the bind and I'll have a good car that's worth more than what I paid. But if you're not mechanically inclined, you're not going to do the work yourself, you can really stand to be burned pretty bad. So we're going to see if we can get this thing running for the customer and stay under their budget, at least get it running and driving. Then they'll get it back home. They can regroup and decide how much further do they want to go with this car. Do they want to save up some money and do some body work? Do they want to do some windshield work around the windshield like Bill mentioned? Or do they just want to stop and maybe they sell it to somebody who can take it further from there? That'll be a decision they have to make when they get it home. And some people, it can take a couple of months to get that decision made. They don't make a decision like that in a day or two. So thanks, Phil, for coming out and giving some commentary. It made me think of the 260Z we worked on. And if you guys want to see that car, click the link below. There's a link to that video.
Oh man, that's an old video.
It's old. You want to see classic vintage Car Wizard where we're talking into iPhones for a microphone, go back and watch that video.
Dude, the wizard had hair.
Back when I had hair. That was a long time ago. That was years ago.
Golly days.
Oh golly, yeah, you kept saying that. But if you're curious what kind of tools we're using to work on this car, check my Amazon affiliates link. It's also in the description below. We get a small cut and we really appreciate it. And make sure to hit the subscribe button because there's so many more cool cars in the shop. Thanks for watching.